Hello and welcome to What Lingers, the podcast where we uncover the questions behind people's stories. I am Christian Figueroa.
And I'm Liz Melkor. Together, we're the team behind Storytelling Lisboa, where once a month, 10 storytellers get on stage in front of 200 people and share true personal stories around a theme.
It's always an incredible night, but there is a catch. We always have lingering questions for the storytellers.
In our podcast, What Lingers, we get the answers. In our third season, we jump right in and take you back to that stage. You'll hear the original story told that night.
Then, we sit down with the storyteller for a deeper conversation to explore what lingers for all of us.
Just a quick note, since these recordings are from the actual stage, the audio might be a bit raw.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Well, I'm nervous. This is going to be interesting. So, when I was 19 years old, I wanted to see the world. I really wanted to see the world, and I wanted to see it differently. So, I took a one-way flight to Nepal, and I wanted to get back to Germany, hitchhiking, walking, any way I could. And on the way, I crossed Mongolia. And in Mongolia, I bought a horse because walking wouldn't work anymore. So I bought a horse and I would travel and travel and travel. And I kept going and I was never looking back. I never looked back, not a single day. I would always just keep on going. And then one day, I went into a town. I haven't met anybody for about 2.5 weeks. So I haven't spoken to anyone. Well, I've met nomads along the way every couple of weeks, and they sold me some bread, and but I haven't spoken my language, and I haven't spoken much at all. And in Khatkal, which is in the northwest of Mongolia, I met Timulin, a young tourist guide who was passing through with her group of tourists, and so she spoke English. And I was so happy to have someone to talk to. I was like, you speak English and I'm staying here for the same night as you are staying here as well? And so it was it was wonderful. and at the same time, I must have been completely horrible to look at. I smelled I haven't showered for weeks, so I smelled horrible. I looked like I've just come out of the river. And I was dirty all over, and so the first time we met, I hadn't shaved. I was ugly, and then at night I got to take a shower. The next day we met again. She was beautiful, and she looked at me, and we talked, and we kept on talking. Then she did a day trip with her tourists, and I did nothing because I was exhausted. And she came back in the evening, and there we were. We were sitting at the table, and they had wine. They brought wine. Tourists have those kind of things. That's wonderful. So they opened a bottle of wine, and we played a game of cards. And it was like this Mongolian game. So she explained the rules. I never got them, to be honest. And I lost every single game, and I kept losing. And she was like, oh, it's this card, and I was again, I lost. And then the tourists slowly went to bed, they left, one after the other, and it got late, and we were still just playing cards. I didn't really know what to do with myself, to be honest. I felt insecure, I felt like I was trampling on my words. I usually feel quite comfortable with my words, but that night I was completely overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do with myself. And we kept on playing cards. And at some point she was like, this is should we maybe move somewhere else? Because this is and I was like, I didn't get it. I didn't get it. And then she was like, it's getting cold, we should light a fire. They had those gears. A gear is a white tent, and it's they have beds in there, it's quite comfortable. So she was like, well, we light a fire and we make ourselves comfortable, and I still didn't get it, so I brought the cards. And so we are in the tent, on the bed. It's like, there's like furs in the tent, it was like, the fire was lit, and I was like, I finally got the game, and I placed the card, and she was like, no, you lost again. But like, and so we kept on like moving closer. When I say we, I mean she moved closer to me a little bit. And so, and she kissed me. And I think like, over all this time while I was traveling alone, I was looking for like some kind of, I don't know what I was looking for, but I felt that all the loneliness, all this like desire to escape everything suddenly didn't matter. So I was there, and she kissed me, and I pushed away the cards, and she kissed me more. And it was beautiful, and I was trembling. I didn't know what to do with myself. I was like, and then also like, I haven't met people for a while, so I was also nervous, and so moved a little more. And I'm not gonna go too much into detail, but it was really nice, and it happened more than once. And the next morning, like right after I got up, she was like, I gotta go, like, and so she left, because like they had to keep on going on their trip wherever they were going. And I was like, do I have your number? Like, am I gonna see you again? And I stayed another night in Khatkal. It was the first like place with real people. And from there, I was like, where am I gonna go next? And I was like, well, gotta keep on going. But before I left, the owner of the place, like the owner of where the carriers were, like, do you want her number? And I was like, yeah. She's like, she left it, like she left information for you. And I was like, perfect. But also I knew it was like, well, she's going that way, I'm going that way, so probably like, and so also my visa was running out, so I only had like a couple more days in Mongolia, so it was like, I gotta go. And so I left Mongolia, and I entered Russia. This was 2017, so it was still kind of problematic in the end. It's a long story, but so I entered Russia, and I entered to the Baikal Lake, and there I wrote her, and she was like, okay, well, next week I'm free, we can meet. And so she went all the way to the Baikal Lake, and we met there. And then we went hiking together for, I don't know, like 5 days, I think it was. And we were enjoying ourselves, like the best views, like outside, along the path, like when we felt like it. And then we got back to Lanuda because I had to catch a train and she had to work. And she said, I love you. And I was like, no, you don't. I was like, I don't know what, like, we just met, like, and you can't be loving me. I didn't even talk about my own feelings. I was like, no, you can't be loving me because I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what to do. So I told her, like, no, you're not loving me. And she was like, no, I am. I was like, I have to leave. I don't know what. I felt like I was exploding inside, and I think it took me years to realize that it was my incapacity to like feel loved. And like for years after that, I kept running away and kept meeting people and kept turning my back on them. And now I think back on it, and I'm like, well, maybe I should have just let it be, and let like it's okay to be loved, and it's okay to accept that someone actually likes you and enjoys spending time with you and thinks you're worth traveling after. And it took a very long time for me to like realize that. And I think that is a big thing that I've learned, and it took me some years to. And what I also learned of that is that it's never too late to look back on relationships, even if they're just an instant, even if they're just a night, and think of like what you've gained during that night, like how you connected with someone, and how a magical night of sex or something completely random, or some orgy or whatever has happened to you, like how that might like contribute something to your life. And like every connection we make is important, and it's beautiful, and I hope you guys are a little quicker to catch on.
Jeremias, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for accepting the invitation to talk more about your story. And of course, we know you from the stage, but would you mind introducing yourself for people listening at home around the world?
Hi, I'm Jeremias, and I'm 27 years old, and I'm originally from Hamburg in Germany. But since I've been 14 years old, I've been moving around the world quite a lot. I'm currently living full-time in my van, and for the last half year, I've been living in the Lisbon area. So that's how I've got connected to Storytelling Lisboa. And now I've been moving back home. So I'm currently in Germany, and because I'm doing an internship here.
Okay, so your name is Jeremias, not Jeremias.
Yes.
Jeremias, oder?
Exactly.
And what's your internship in?
It's in a publisher's house. So I'm currently writing articles for like outdoor magazines.
That sounds very appropriate given maybe your history and your story. So actually, let's start with the very beginning of the story. You're 19 years old, and I'm assuming you tell your parents, like, hey, I'm going to go to Nepal, and then I'm going to hitchhike my way back to Germany. So I'm wondering, how did your parents react to your plan? And also, did you have a plan, or was it like, I'm just going to fly to Nepal and then see what happens?
So there's not really, I'm going to ask my parents. I just told them I'm booking a one-way flight to Nepal. And I think they assumed that I'd be coming back after I've visited Nepal. And so they just thought like, well, he's going for a trip. And they didn't know that I planned on continuing on traveling. I don't think I did either. Like I knew that I wanted to keep on traveling, but I didn't know where exactly.
Were you always interested about going abroad and traveling the world? How did this dream started, this desire of exploring the world?
So before I booked my flight to Nepal, I was working for an international nonprofit organization. And so from my 18th to my 19th year, I was still very young, I accepted first an internship in Mexico City. And I was working there for an international nonprofit. And then afterwards, I traveled around the world for them, organizing, both community service and promoting like benefit concerts in different cities around the world. So I was traveling before that. But I was traveling in a suit and like talking to people and like more in a professional context. So I wanted to travel, I would say, in a more free sense. So like without obligations, without work, without having to appear in a certain way. So for me, it was a different kind of traveling that I wanted to do.
Absolutely. And I'm kind of blown away because I'm thinking like when I was 18, I was just like trying to figure out whether if I was going to be gay or not. And you're like already traveling around the world and just like doing this amazing work with nonprofits. So, wow.
So you make your way from Nepal to Mongolia. Is there any big adventure that happens on that leg of the trip?
Well, at the beginning, I thought Nepal was going to be the big adventure, the Himalayas, the altitude. And I realized that Nepal is quite easy to travel because it's very well developed in that sense. If you go to the Himalayas, there's like routes, there's guides, there's everything available. Like you don't even have to bring a tent because along the way, there's places to sleep. So I thought Nepal was going to be this big adventure, and it didn't end up being the great adventure that I thought it would be. So I was like, oh, well, then what's next? I went to China. And I traveled first to Chengdu because like you have to fly somewhere. You can't cross Tibet, at least not without government tours. And so I went to central China, and from there I didn't turn east as most tourists would do. So I traveled west into the, you would say, quite problematic areas in central China. So you have the Xinjiang province, which I crossed hitchhiking, and I got kicked out of the city. I had problems with authorities. Like, you can't really travel that area. If you want to book a bus, you can't, because they would tell you, well, you're not supposed to be there, because they don't want you there. So I traveled all of Western China, close to the border of Kazakhstan, and from there took a train back to Beijing. And on the train ride, I met a young Kazakh who was studying in Beijing, and he ended up having huge problems with authorities just for hosting me. And so in Beijing. And from there on, I went north to Ulaanbaatar, kind of in a rush, because I had to leave China as quick as possible because I didn't feel safe there.
Question, why did he have problems with the authorities, and how was that known? Like, did the authorities show up on his doorstep?
Well, you have like campus security, and in those closed campuses, if you have student housing, you're not allowed to have like foreigners over at your place. And so we snuck into his apartment at night, and he was like, oh, no one's going to see us. It's fine. Like, you can stay over at my place. But yeah, it didn't remain a secret as we both thought. But apparently someone saw us over a security camera, and then like someone came in the middle of the night.
That's intense. Sounds like a lot.
Yeah. Do you get scared? Are you somebody that like doesn't get scared easily, or?
I don't think I would say I'm a person who gets scared easily, but I definitely got scared in that moment. Like, if you think of Chinese authorities, like, those inspire fear to some extent. If someone tells you you're not supposed to be in a place you're supposed to, like, you want to be, then, or you already are, then that scared, like, I was scared.
Of course, I would be terrified. I'm a rule follower, which I guess curbs how much adventure you can have. But I get my adventures. Okay, so then you arrive at the Mongolian border and you buy yourself a horse. Is this correct?
Not exactly. So I first crossed into Ulaanbaatar, crossed the border, went all the way to the capital, and crossing into Mongolia as a German citizen is quite easy. You get visa on arrival. It's all pretty straightforward. And you have to imagine Mongolia, this like huge country in between Russia and China. But the country itself is nothing like both Russia and China. It's very free. There's a nomad culture still being like a very essential part of that culture. And so I was talking in Ulaanbaatar to people in the hostel, and they were like, well, there's only one way to really explore Mongolia. Like, you have to go to the rural areas. You have to see and feel nomad life. And so I was like, well, I'm going to do that. And so, okay, I'm going to take a bus out of the side of the city, and I'll start traveling without any obligation. So I started traveling by foot, and I did about, I think, nearly 300 kilometers, like 270 kilometers by foot walking. And I decided to walk along the Kafskalnua See, which is like Kafskalnua Lake. It's one of the biggest natural drinking water sources in the world. It's a huge lake south of the Baikal Lake. And the interesting part of why I would want to go there is because I read that is one of the few places where you can actually walk without seeing anybody for days. So there's a very low population density. If you go north of Hatkal, there's no real civilization anymore. There's only nomad people living along the way, living there with their herds. And so that's the area I walked.
So like proper nomads, not like nowadays nomads.
No, like people living in nature with their animals.
Yeah, you mentioned that in your story, and you were like, people were selling me bread, and I was like, wait, these are not digital nomads. These are like back in the days nomads.
Digital nomads out on the steppes with their like computer running their drop shipping companies or whatever they do, selling bread on the side hustle. But okay, so when you're walking, you're in the middle of nowhere. The altitude, I'm thinking, is pretty high, right? And are you on like a real path, or do you have to forge your own path and everything?
So both. There is a walking path that the nomads also use to get from A to B, but those walking paths are usually not frequented, so they're overgrown, they're not quite visible, and you have trust concerning direction. And for example, at the very beginning, I had to cross a river because there used to be a bridge, but the bridge wasn't there anymore. So you don't have a reliable path. You have to find your way. You walk up the river until you find a point where it's crossable. So you have to, and then you walk back to looking for the path that used to be there.
Yeah. And what's it like emotionally? Because when I hear this, it terrifies me actually. Like I would be really, really scared to not see anybody and to know that if I looked in all directions, I couldn't find somebody if I needed somebody. And I imagine that that for days is an intense experience. So how was that emotionally for you?
Well, at the very beginning, I met a French guy who had the same idea. And so for the first couple of days, we were walking together. And so that was someone to talk to, someone to joke about. Like we would hear bear at nights. In the morning, we would joke about it. And I think like joking about things always takes off. Like you lose a little bit of that fear. And I think that was very essential for me not having as much fear because we joked so much about it that at some point it's just like, well, well, the noises, it's normal.
The bear growl.
Exactly. But then Flo, that was his name, he traveled south. So he crossed into China. So he traveled kind of reverse the route I was coming from. And so he left, and I was like, well, I'm going to keep on going. I still haven't had my share of adventure. And so I kept on going north, which is going closer to the Russian border. And there I was like, well, I can't keep on going because the distances between nomads have grown like too big, like too large. You can't really do the distance and carry as much food as you would need to. So I decided to buy a horse there, quite far off. And so some of the people from Mongolia took me to someone who would sell horses. And
Can you sort of paint the scene? For some reason, I'm obsessed with this of when you're buying the horse. How many horses are there? How do you choose a horse? Where is this a town?
Not bad. And I wouldn't even know how to get a horse.
so I looked up words in my Lonely Planet little book, and I was like sitting in the tent, like looking up words. And I think probably there's some Mongolians who will correct me in the story afterwards, but the wording I remember is like "Bimorir afmar baina," so it's like I want to buy a horse, and so I would go to people and repeat this random sentence. And imagine like I'm in a little town, so I would say it's 200 people live in there, more or less, maybe some more. I don't know. That's my estimation. And so I would go to people in this town without streets, without gravel like streets, going around from place to place. And I would repeat the sentence and they would say things, look at me and be like, what do you want? And I would keep on repeating the sentence, and then they would pass me to the next person. And at some point, there's like people accompanying me, bringing me from one person to the next person, like carrying me around this little town. And then someone came and drew a number on the floor, but just sticking like drew a number there. And I was like, can't afford that. So I drew a different number because communication is also difficult. You have to decide on like what kind of horse do you want. The only norm for a horse would be the price. So they would drew another number. And at some point we reached the number of 1,000,000 tugrik, which is at that time about like 280, $300, something around that area. And then they were like, okay, let's go. And then we went for about 35, 40 minutes north into nothingness. And like me in the back of a very old pickup truck. And there's no roads that we're going on. We're like just going across meadows. And then we reached this place. And in front of it, there's about 100 horses, I would say. And they're within, well, what is it called? Like a limitation. And then someone came out and was like greeting me and saying hi to me. And then we went outside looking at the horses, and they already knew which horse I'm going to buy because the price already is set. The deal's kind of already made. And I'm not going to go to the horse and be like, I want that one, because I've set a price and this is what we give you for that price.
You're not getting like the top model horse.
I'm getting a horse that is worth $250, including saddle and everything. Everything included is $280, $300.
That's a good price.
That is the price that I bought a horse that is like worth that.
Okay, what does that mean? Was it not the best horse in the world?
It was definitely not the best. It was a very stubborn horse. I think that is for sure. It was not a question of like, it was not a fitness default that it had, but more of like a character flaw, I would say. So when I bought the horse, I didn't know, because I've never ridden a horse since like pony riding in 4th grade. So I had no horse experience. And so I was at this place and they all work with horses all day long. And I imagine them like knowing, well, there's this kid, he has no idea what he's doing. Like, look at him. But he wants to buy the horse, so here we go. And so they got out the horse, put on the saddle and everything, and then like went with the horse to me and like, oh, get up. And so I mounted the horse and it stood still. Like I thought it's going to be easy. Like, well, I can just get up and go riding. Probably because of the circumstance, the horse knew, well, he has to behave because my bot's watching. But from that moment on forth, the horse did not do what I wanted to do, because like I feel like horses can scent that you don't know what you're doing.
Yes.
That makes them afraid. And
Yes.
so you had a horse that is afraid of me, and I was afraid of that horse because of that. And from that day forth, it was a long process of me actually being able to ride that horse confidently. I've fallen off more times than I can count. So
Oh, wow. You were falling off the horse?
it like just like trying to go close to it, it wouldn't let me.
Yeah.
It would like try to like hit me with his shoulder, and it would bite after me and be like, what do you want from me? So on that day, I left the place and tried to ride back to the civilization, but like at some point I couldn't keep on riding, so I kind of attached it to like a tray and mounted my tent. And the next morning it was like, well, gotta put the saddle back on, and it wouldn't let me. And I couldn't get the saddle on the horse. I had no idea how.
Exactly. I was going to say, like, I need to praise your courage, because horses they're sensitive animals, but they're also very dangerous animals. And yeah, you went there and just like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm gonna do it. So it takes a lot of courage. Like, as I was saying, I went to vet school, and even in vet school, a lot of people were afraid of horses because they're really difficult to handle. And you just got this horse to travel around Mongolia and try to figure it out along the way, like while you were riding the horse and having all this trouble. So yeah, like not only for traveling around the world and being all these things, but I think that says a lot about you, just this specific moment with the horse.
And following on that, like you got to Nepal and it wasn't adventurous enough for you. And so now when you're like fighting your horse in the morning, trying to put the saddle on, are you finally thinking to yourself, okay, this is the adventure I wanted?
No, I think it was like, well, you wanted adventure, now you have adventure. Maybe you've kind of gotten yourself in something like that. Like, I think once you cross into adventure, then it's already kind of like too much for you. So you can think of it in as adventure in retrospect, but in that moment, I was scared. I was in the middle of nothingness. I was riding distances I couldn't ride. I had no idea how. And I think that is where other people came into play. I think by myself, I don't think I would have gotten myself out of that situation safely. But people came along, like people passed by and were like, oh, well, we'll help you. Like after me 5 hours trying to put the saddle on, someone just came along and showed me in like 6 minutes how to do it. And once someone has shown you how to do it, you can replicate that, even though it takes longer, even though you need multiple tries. Once you've seen someone do it and explain to you how, without words, obviously, like just showing you how to, it's something possible. And then I kept on riding, and then next day someone showed me like how to tie the right knot. So when the horse gets scared, so you can loosen it up, like simple thing, those things people taught me, just like nomads passing by. And also, I think people were just curious. Anybody who saw me would want to approach me because what is this guy doing with a huge backpack on a horse that he obviously can't control in the middle of nothingness? So people approached me and helped me out in the beginning. And from there, I did a large distance by myself. So I started growing more confident in like just a matter of days. Because at first I thought I can do anything, and then I realized I couldn't. But then as soon as I could do something, I was like, well, I can do anything again. And so I did about 60 kilometers a day. So I started riding with the first rays of sunshine, and I wouldn't stop riding until setting the sun. So I would ride all day, all the way north, across to like a little mountain path. But the more distance I did, the kind of more lonely I also got.
You spend a few days riding your horse, and then you said that you spend a few days not even speaking a word and not talking your language, of course, which is German. But I guess that also you weren't speaking English, because I mean, people don't, from what you're saying, they don't communicate a lot with you in English. And then you arrived to this town and you met this tourist guy, the girl that you mentioned in your story. You bring us a little bit more of like, how was that encounter? emotionally, you told us that it was really lovely to have someone to talk to and to socialize, I guess. It was just like a simple basic need of humans, which is connecting with other people. So would you mind just sharing a little bit about this encounter with this girl?
Yes, I think for me it was a very liberating feeling to have someone that I can talk to, someone that understands me, a point where like I've reached a destination where I can take a pause, take a rest. So a little bit of pressure, adrenaline, like all of that falling off a little and feeling safe and having the need for communication and someone being there interested in me and speaking my language and being about my age as well. So like you have all those components that create an emotional stimuli that is like heartwarming. I felt drawn to that girl immediately because it was the first person that I met really interested, but also gave me the sensation of, oh, well, you've arrived, you can take a rest, stay here, let's talk, like, let's just be together for a while.
My attention from your story is that you were in this very unique circumstance and you're playing your cards and your game and you're kind of having a date with this girl, but also you feel very nervous and you feel like you don't know what to do. It got me wondering if you were always like this, like a shy person, or it was just because you were in the middle of nowhere with this girl that you just met and you didn't know what to do.
So on the contrary, I think I was always very extroverted. I engaged with people quite easily. And I've been on dates before and I had no problem with it at all. But I think I used to be very confident even back then. But having spent so much time by myself and having spent time with like thinking, like I think if you spend time just thinking about yourself, about your behavior, like you start to maybe become more insecure about yourself. And so then I met this girl and I was in a more unstable place myself. And I was like wondering, well, she noticed. I felt drawn to her and I felt the need for having someone close to me. I really wanted to have interaction. And so when I met her, I questioned all the previous behavior and maybe she liked me because of that, or I don't know why, but yeah.
And so you guys share this amazing night together and then she leaves and you're back to alone. And then you meet up with her again at Lake Baikal in Russia. And we hear a little bit about that in the story, but I'm wondering if we can hear more. You guys were together for 5 days. And what were you talking about? Did you really get to know her? Did the nerves finally subside for you? But also, I just have to say, when you generally feel confident and then you meet somebody that throws you off your game and you feel nervous, it's kind of magical. But so how was this 5-day Russia trip?
As you said, it's kind of magical. It was a huge contrast to my previous time. So I've been traveling for some time now, and suddenly I'm not traveling alone. Suddenly I'm traveling with someone that I share a tent with, that I walk together every day. I'm not walking by myself. I'm talking to someone. We share the load. We share the food. We do all those things together. We hitchhike together. And for her, it was a very new experience traveling the way I did. And she was like, well, I'd never thought this was even possible. And she would tell me how much of an interesting experience is just traveling with me together. And for me, at the same time, it was a very interesting experience not traveling alone, because I would never have someone to share my thoughts with, like share my experiences with and discuss them. I think you can make all kinds of experiences, but if you keep them for yourself, like keep them to yourself, then your thoughts can spiral out of control quite quickly. And my thoughts have already been spiraling out of control. Like, how do you end up in the middle of Mongolia having crazy ideas, like crossing into Russia and doing things that are completely unsafe? They were like there's a little bit of like a self-destructive element to it.
What was an example of something that you did that was unsafe?
So in Mongolia, back sleeping in a tent with -degrees, I would like have like serious, what is it called? Hypothermias. So I would be afraid of falling asleep because I was so cold that my hands would start to turn a little blue. I couldn't breathe properly. So I would have been like serious, like systematic hypothermia. And then falling off my horse, I injured myself. I had problems with nurturing myself, wouldn't eat sufficiently, wouldn't have the energy for doing the trips I was doing. So I was already in a place where I was doing stuff that I wasn't supposed to do. And my body was like telling me, Jeremias, you have to stop. And then, so the time with Timberland was a time where this didn't happen, where I would have someone that would talk to me and we would travel. Like we would be hiking along the Baikal Lake, but we would do a couple of kilometers a day. We would sit down, eat halfway through. We'd have a solid amount of food. We would plan a day trip. And so she also had a moderating influence of my time there. Suddenly, it was not an experience going to my personal extremes, but instead more of an emotional time that I really needed in like a break.
Yeah. You have somebody else there and you have to take care of them a little bit, right? Or you have to watch out for them. So then you end up having to watch out for yourself.
Exactly.
And then this girl, you're spending this time together, and she comes and she says that she loves you just a few days or probably weeks after you met. And you mentioned in your story that you immediately said like, no, you don't love me. Because of course, I guess there was a part in your mind that this is too soon for you to love me. But would you mind going a little bit deeper into that specific moment of how it felt for you, or why you felt this way, or how also she reacted when you told her that? Like, she's being vulnerable with you, and then you're like rejecting probably her emotional state. What happened after that?
The thing that stuck with me most from all the time together, her telling me that she loves me and me being unable to accept that. So it was a complete rejection of like, I didn't believe that someone was capable of loving me after having known me for such a short amount of time. And I think that also comes down to like something that afterwards, like I've been struggling a lot with, like being able to accept when someone shows me sincere affection. So accepting that that is something that people are capable of when it comes to me, like comes to knowing me. And so at that time, I was completely unable to even comprehend how that is possible. I was telling her, no, like you can't be loving me. Like what's, like how? And then I was asking her, how do you define it? I was trying to make sense of the wording she used. And she was like, well, can't explain it, but like, you can't be telling me that I'm incapable of, like, maybe you are not able to understand it, but that's how I feel. And I think for me, it was a time where I was pushing back and was like trying to like distance myself from it simply. And in retrospect, I can say, I think I distanced myself from her because I was unable to understand how. I just didn't get it.
You're talking about sort of being self-destructive a bit on your trip. And it's sort of like you're almost like looking for this sort of self-love, and then she's saying I love you, and it's like internally you don't really feel that you can love yourself. Was it like that, or am I getting it wrong?
No, I think like that's exactly what, like, in retrospect it's easy to understand that, but in that moment it was completely incomprehensible. But yes, I think I was looking for a way of like being able to love myself, and she expressed that she was able to love me without knowing me for a long time, and I've been struggling with that for some time. So it's like, I was like, but I didn't ask why. I just told her not. And so maybe it would have been more instructive to understand where she's coming from and like, and engage with that. But at the moment, I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah.
But also, I feel like her response a little bit is almost like, no, you don't need to explain it. Like, it doesn't need to be logically explained, right? That this is just, it was her offering her love.
Yes, but I think concerning those questions, I've been very much trying to over-rationalize things. I would try to find definitions. And years afterwards, I would be reading different ideals. I would be reading Erich Fromm and like The Art of Loving and be like, I want to find some socio-psychological understanding of those kind of things.
And what did you feel towards her? I mean, did it make you question your own feelings towards her? Like, did you feel love in that moment, or?
I think if I was feeling those things, I was rejecting those feelings at the same time. So I think human behavior contains contradictions, and those contradictions create kind of tension. And I think we had that tension, and those tensions even intensified afterwards. But it is because you can both feel drawn to someone and reject what that person represents for you. And this very tension became imminent in that very instance, because at one point, like, I felt drawn to her, and the affection that she was giving me because I was longing for that. But at the same time, I was rejecting it because I was unable to, feel those kind of affections for myself. So how would someone else be able to feel that?
Totally. And this is a really pivotal moment, right? Because she's also like in real life at that moment, she's leaving and you might never see her again. And I think you've never seen her again.
No.
And then you're leaving and you're going back to aloneness.
Yes. And later on, I would realize like how that moment was a point of that trip that also marked another turning point, another intensification, because from that moment on, I took the Trans-Siberian train and continued my travel on to Russia, like crossing Russia and with all the way to Moscow. But I kept on drinking more and I started to turn real sick. But at the moment, I didn't realize it fully. But already, like looking back on my notes from that time, like there's entire sentences like being scribbled away. There's like a lot of tears and like in the notes, and there's a lot of things that are unreadable simply because my body and my mind was deteriorating, and I started to have waves of fever that like would come and pass. And like being in Moscow, I would be sick but only partially, and I got arrested in Moscow as well. So
I did want you to talk about that just really briefly, because we talked about that after your story and I was like, whoa. And you got arrested and then deported, right?
Exactly. And at that time I was already sick, but I didn't know. I was like thinking, well, it's the adrenaline. But after I left Tumulin, I was starting to feel the first kind of waves of fever, and then I had problems with the authority when I came to Moscow because I got picked up by the police due to the invalid visa for Russia. And so they arrested me and then got in contact with the German embassy in Moscow. And then they were like, well, you can't leave Moscow. You can't leave Russia right now. You have to wait for your appointment with the immigration court. And so I was in Russia and I was unable to leave.
Were you in a cell?
At the very beginning, yes. But then I had to pay a little fine to get out. And then I was able to move freely around Moscow, but without a passport. So I couldn't check into any hotel, any hostel, no other place. So I had to stay with the locals. So over couch surfing, I got to know really nice Russian. I'm not going to say the name for obvious reasons, but I got to know a really, really friendly person who helped me and picked me up and was like, well, I'm going to show you around Moscow and help you with the translations of the documents, and was interested in my story, at the same time being another person along the way who helped me. And yeah, so I didn't know, but I had an infection that I caught in Mongolia, and that was slowly eating away, destroying my liver and my internal organs. So I was like having waves of fever, and it would come and go because the infection that I had would like come over a period of about 6 to 8 weeks, only like slowly mounting. And so I was starting to feel bad already. And then the confrontation with the authorities, the adrenaline, like everything became a little bit of a living nightmare.
Like all the signs were kind of telling you you need to stop, basically. Like everything is just falling apart as you go.
Exactly. Everything was falling apart, but at the same time, I couldn't stop because I was unable to leave.
Yeah.
I couldn't just take a plane out because I had to go to the court appointment, and people saying things in Russian. Imagine crossing those cold marble floors, people talking and you unable to understand anything. There's no translators, nobody who helps you because nobody was allowed to come with me into the appointment. And then someone giving me a document saying you have to sign this. I didn't know what I was signing. It was in Cyrillic. I was unable to use my phone. I was unable to communicate to anybody. I can only imagine my parents being back home, and they got a call from the embassy and be like, your son, well, he's now in Moscow. And like, they didn't know, having serious problems. I didn't know about my medical situations, nor did anybody else. And so I only knew that like everything was falling apart. And then finally I got deported, and only 2 days later in Germany, my entire system collapsed and I spent over a month in a hospital.
Oh, wow.
Okay, can I just go to the deportation really quickly, just because logistics are interesting to me? So you sign this document in the court that decides your fate, even though you have no idea what you signed, no idea what your fate is. And then do you just go to the airport and get on an airplane, or is there some sort of special, are they like escorting you onto the plane?
They gave me a document, and then with that document, I left the building and went back to the host I was at. And he was telling me, well, you get on it. You have 24 hours to leave the country. Book your first flight. And the next day I would go to the court, and I would bring the document of the court order of me having to leave, and I would bring my and I was given back my passport, and there's like a little police station at the airport, and people from that airport like came out, checked the document, made a call, and then put me on a plane, and then I left.
And then you arrive in Germany and immediately to the hospital, or your parents, they grab you and they're like, thank God you're alive.
I think like at that moment, like when you get back home, it's like completely overwhelming as well. Because at the moment I was like just overwhelmed with the entire situation, and people were like wanting to know how it was. People wanted to like talk about my travels, and all I wanted was like quiet, because I was already like very far away mentally, and I was like just shut up, like leave me be. And that is, I think, something very difficult. Like people kept wanting to have information. They wanted to understand, because their son has been gone for quite a while, and like nobody knew what has been happening to me, and now he's back and he doesn't want to talk about it.
How long in total were you traveling since you arrived to Nepal and you came back to Germany?
I think it was a little more than 4 months, 4 months and a half, something like that. So it was not that long of a time period, but at the same time, like for me, it felt like an eternity.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you remember what was in your body, like the infection? I mean, it sounds like you were almost in a sepsis state of your infection spreading out and going to your organs. Like this is kind of a life and death situation.
It was called a leptospirosis. So it's a bacterial infection that is usually transferred by like animal shit. And so the doctor in retrospect told me, well, it was probably because the drinking water, maybe it was unclean. But the thing is like that kind of bacterial infection, like slowly, I had a very long time period of manifesting in your body. So I had those fever waves that came and then went again, and then came and until like the period of like fever waves like slowly intensified, and then at the very end, like the entire combination, it was just a collapse, and I was like, can't anymore. Well, that's it.
Wow, it seems like a big journey for you, and I can imagine the impact that this whole 4 months and meeting this girl and being sick, being deported, it was like a full package of transformation for you in your life. Do you have this like recognition or awareness that this trip kind of changes your life? And you mentioned something about starting to read about love and trying to understand yourself more, you being with yourself for a long time, having all these behaviors. How are you now? What happened after this trip? I don't know. Did you start therapy, or did you change some habits in your life, or are you still in touch with this girl?
So I think the story that I told and storytelling was a very short but specific moment. But over the period, like the process of getting to know someone and rejecting them afterwards and keep on going has been something that was happening before and kept on happening afterwards. So the continuous rejection of someone showing affection to me, and still at the same time having the longing for someone showing affection. So that was something that like kept on accompanying me throughout my life afterwards. And I kept on doing more trips that were to some extent equally or even more extreme. So I crossed Iran 2 years afterwards, and after going through the end of a very emotional relationship, and I decided to take a trip to Iran and passing 2 months traveling across the eastern part close to the Afghan border and doing trips that are as self-destructive to some extent. Whenever I went through very emotional stages in my life, I would seek out danger. But then I think at some point it was like, if I'm going to keep on going, I'm going to kill myself. Like through something like that, something is going to happen. There's going to be an end to it. And so I realized, well, no, I've gone to the edge, and that is enough. And since then, I've gotten a lot more moderate and still looking out for like beautiful moments and seeking out intensity in life, and realizing like, I think extreme situations also bring about intensity. Intensity kind of makes you feel alive. And I think that is something beautiful, but also knowing when to stop. So I think I've gotten a lot better at knowing this is the line, don't cross it.
Yeah, or sometimes I think too, for me, like getting older has also been getting to a point where you realize like there's something beautiful too in more the steadiness, like sometimes it's like getting those highs and lows, because your trip is a trip of extreme highs and extreme lows. And it sounds just so amazing, but sometimes there's something in just like tolerating the more mundane of life. There's a beauty in it. So the self-destructiveness has diminished now as you've gotten older?
Yes, I think that very much coincides with like personal relations. So I think afterwards I've met like different kinds of people. I've had different kinds of extremes in other directions as well. Like if it comes to like partying or like I've seeked out more extremes in other parts of life. But currently I feel in a very, very stable and like also very like happy kind of relationship. And I've realized that there's other kinds of extremes. For example, sitting down, reading a beautiful book, and then that can be extremely satisfying as well. And also, I think one of the big changes that has been happening was me being able to reflect on those moments. So I've really gotten into writing in the last 3 years, and that is my personal kind of therapy. If you sit down and write and rewrite the same experiences over and over and over, then that is something that helps me personally to accept and understand my own behavior better.
You do this sports that I feel like it can be a way of putting out there that energy and that adventure, the adrenaline, in a different way, right? Is it kite surfing, windsurfing that you do professionally?
Well, kite surfing I do. Well, I wouldn't say professionally, but like semi. Like I go a lot and I love it. And yes, I think that is a very healthy kind of moderate extreme that is really helpful. But even last year was a year for me where I was unable to do that as well, because I broken a shoulder and a leg. And so I'm a super active person, but last year I was stuck inside, not being able to do all those things. So I had to find other ways of engaging with it. And it was not a sad time for me. I think even that helped me to become more settled down, calm down a little more. And right now I feel really happy in the situation where I'm at.
And can we expect a book about these travels at some point?
Well, I've published a book about my Asia trip 2 years back. And it's written in German though, so unless you're able to read German, then
Ich kann ein bisschen.
Well, then you might be able to read that book. And I'm currently writing a second book about my travels across Iran. So I hope to be able to finish the first draft next year in spring.
Awesome. We will link those books so that people can read them and practice their German, like me. And we just have one final question for you before we let you go. And that is, how has it been revisiting your story today?
It's really nice. I think talking about those experiences is liberating. I think talking to people that are interested and sharing your own personal experiences is always something that helps you reflect, but then also it kind of, once you set experiences free and set them free into the world, then you kind of set yourself free as well.
That's it for this episode of What Lingers.
If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. It really helps us reach more listeners. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, we'd love for you to share this episode with them.
What Lingers is a podcast from the team behind Storytelling Lisboa, and is produced by both Liz and I, and edited by Liz.
We're a small project, and your support truly motivates us to keep going.
Would also love to hear from you. Feel free to send us a DM or even a voice note with your thoughts, your comments, or questions to our Instagram @WhatLingersPod.
Don't forget to subscribe and follow us so you never miss what lingers next.
Bye!
Bye!